Over 33,000 of you voted in my poll yesterday with an overwhelming majority of 99% saying no. It is not acceptable or justified for someone to avoid jail just because they didn't know it was illegal. This is not only probably the highest amount of votes I've ever had on a poll, but certainly the most overwhelming majority. And also, as a side note, the 1% is possibly just because one or two people said yes, and not necessarily calculated mathematically out of 33,000 votes. This video is a brief discussion as to the reasoning and rationale behind the judgment. Not that I agree with it, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. So first of all, opening with the overview of the notion that ignorance of the law is no defense. Indeed, I was called out by saying that in previous videos. I pinned the comment because I still agree with it. I do agree that ignorance of the law is no defense. But even then, you could say, and you could justifiably argue to say that the punishment should fit the crime. I mean, in some cases, this story here, a lady was sent to jail for 4 years in Dubai because they found codeine in her bloodstream. Now, obviously, that is a banned substance there, whereas it's a very common prescribed painkiller in other parts of the world. Nonetheless, she was found to have that in her system, and she was sent to prison for 4 years. So there is the argument that the punishment should fit the crime. But the crime in this case, obviously, I'm going to avoid certain words when talking about it to avoid being flagged up by the YouTube algorithms. You can read that discussion for yourself there. And you can also read the title of the Daily Mail article here. Now, first of all, I will open by saying that this is not an attack against this man himself. It's certainly not an attack against the Muslim faith. Because, in fact, as you will see throughout this article, there are references that he would have been told that this was wrong in the faith school that he attended, and it is certainly wrong in that faith. So this is certainly no attack upon the faith. I've got some very close friends of the Muslim faith, and they're very close to me. I've known them for a long time. So with that in mind, please be respectful in the comments and don't attack each other. Don't attack certain groups of society because of this article. But I feel that it warrants discussion because, albeit an old story, this is back from 2013, made its way back into the media again just recently and is picked up by lots of other articles. So at the very least, whilst I may not personally agree with the end result of this judgment, I am going to tell you what the reasoning was, albeit fairly simplistic in nature, and I can't find any more detail about it because it doesn't appear that this was appealed. Certainly, I couldn't find any appeal on it. Crown Court cases are not routinely in legal databases unless there's a very specific reason. And even then, usually when they are appealed and that they end up in our law references and libraries and so on. So the essence of this story is this. He had quite openly admitted and agreed to what had happened, and he said that he met this 13-year-old on Facebook. They'd communicated for over 2 months. He was educated in a madrasa, which is a faith school, had little experience. There is a strange reference here. Even the judge said that it was strange that he was taught that women were no more worthy than a lollipop and to be dropped on the ground. Very strange way, and I'm not in any way suggesting that every faith school across the country is teaching this sort of thing. I think that would be wrong to say. I think it would certainly be wrong for people to assume. So just again to make that clear. He'd said that he was reluctant at first, but then he said that he was seduced and agreed. Now, there is one thing that I take issue in here with, in that the judge did say that she was quite willing, but the laws are there to protect young girls. Now, this is the bit that I take issue with, because in fact, I don't see and I don't agree that you could say that someone of that age was quite willing when the law says that they cannot consent at that age. Now, in different parts of the world, there are different ages for consent. Ours is certainly not as young as that. So in law, she could not be willing. But factually, so the court was told, she was quite willing, which obviously played a part in the overall judgment. Now, As I said before, I am not a judge. I will defer to what a judge's reasoning is. I'll explain what that is. You don't have to agree with it, but nonetheless, I felt that this was worthy of at least telling you what this reasoning was. So in essence, he had claimed what he had been taught so far, which is very strange, and I would certainly like to think quite an isolated way of teaching. But the judge also made clear that he would have been told by his school that this was wrong outside of marriage, and it was contrary to the precepts of Islam. And so to have these relations before marriage was wrong. The judge said that he must have known that what he was doing was wrong unless he was walking around with his eyes shut. Defense counsel had said that he was naive, didn't have very much understanding about this kind of thing. But nonetheless, the conclusion was that he must have known it was illegal. So as it seems to be the case, this young girl had confessed to a friend who then told the teachers, who then in turn doubtless reported it to the police, and he was arrested the following week. Now, judge seems to accept that he had some naivety. First of all, why did he not get a very lengthy custodial sentence? Well, there's another interesting bit here in that a sentence can only be suspended, i.e. you don't go straight to prison if it's under 2 years. And so this was, I think, a 9-month sentence, albeit obviously suspended. Let me just check that. Yes, 9 months. So 9 months youth custody, obviously because of the age he was at the time. But along with a 2-year probation. So suspended for 2 years. So if he did anything else within that 2 years, he does indeed go straight to prison, not just for the original offence, but the new offence as well. And just in case this wasn't absolutely clear to everybody, even if two people like this do consent, there's still statutory restrictions that make it an offence, which is why it is still an offence. So the bottom line is that the judge took the view that sending him to prison was not going to help him. And whilst he was clearly breaking the law, defence counsel said, and the reports had suggested, that he just had a degree of naivety and didn't really understand sort of how wrong it was, although the judge said he must have known that it was wrong. The judge said that he was passive, lacking assertiveness, and as the judge said here, sending him to jail might do him more harm than good. Now, there are certain areas of the world that have rehabilitative community structures instead of prisons, with the aim that these areas will assist people in developing their characters, their personalities, their understandings, and becoming better functional members of society. This is an age-old debate about people improving themselves or being improved by the system that they're in, as opposed to becoming a worse criminal by going to prison. Now, as the saying goes, prisons can often breed better criminals, and someone that is convicted of something and goes to prison may well become a worse personality when they come out. So the judge's reasoning in this case is quite clearly that the judge took the view that sending him to jail might cause him more harm, more damage, in the judge's words, than good. Now, as I said, that is not to say that you have to agree with this reasoning, particularly in view of the fact that these crimes usually result in a 4 to 7 year prison sentence, bearing in mind the maximum is very much more than that. And I take the view, personally, that these sort of offences should be more heavily punished, save for the fact that I do like the idea of these areas in various parts of the world that improve convicts rather than simply breed more dangerous criminals. Now, looking at the sentencing guidelines for this, the more serious starting point for custody is in this top range of seriousness and culpability, so for example, significant degree of planning together with others, the use of alcohol, abuse of trust, previous violence, and all sorts of other things that clearly make these sort of things significantly worse. And you can probably agree, whether you agree with the outcome or not, you can probably agree that this list of factors in the culpability are very much worse than the story where both were willing, even though if one wasn't legally capable of providing valid consent. This is a very, very different scenario. But even then, even in the very bottom range of this category, we are looking still at 4 to 7 years. And so this case would be in the very bottom range of all of this, given that if the judge accepted there was willingness on the parties there. But then the counter argument is, because of the age, this should actually be very much more serious. And so one way or another, you could come to the conclusion that this was manifestly wrong, albeit I can't find a record of appeal for this case. But there it is. That was the judge's reasoning. As I said, you don't necessarily agree with that, or maybe you do. Maybe now that you can see there is a reasoning there and justification that this would have made things worse. But as per the poll, let me know what you think in the comments. And just to recap, I'm not saying that I agree with this reasoning and justification, but at the same time, this video is not an attack upon the faith or any one individual or another. But I'd be very interested in the discussion that follows, and let me know what you think about this approach, particularly with the view to rehabilitating offenders as opposed to simply locking them away. And with that in mind, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say thank you to all of my channel members who are listed here. I am now going to start listing all of my channel members in thanks and gratitude to you joining my channel as a member. And of course, all of those of you on Patreon and those that support this channel by way of contributions and monthly contributions and so on, with the links in the description below. And with that in mind, finally, the link to this article is in the description below for you to draw your own views and context from the article as it was originally reported. But in the meantime, I thank you for watching. I thank you for your attention, and I'll see you next time.